Welcome back to the Be the CEO of Your Life and Business podcast. Today is a very special episode. Amy and I cannot believe that we are here. This is our 100th episode. Can you believe it?
No, I really can't. I feel like we blinked and we're here.
Yeah, I mean, it's been almost 2 years that we've been recording this podcast, and we have done it. We have not missed a week. No, not one. Since June of 2021. Yeah. That is absolutely crazy. So what we want to talk about today is really the podcast and how it's evolved over the last 2 years. It's definitely different from what we originally envisioned for this podcast. Wouldn't you say that?
Totally. Yeah, I think it's definitely evolved. It's kind of changed along the same lines that we have in our business, which has been really exciting too. Yeah. But I think there's a lesson in there that we'll talk about today too.
Yeah, it's been really, really interesting. When we started this podcast, if we go way back to episode 1 in June, I think it was June, the first week of June in 2021. Yeah. That the first 4 episodes were released. And Amy and I told the story of how the idea for the podcast came about, which was, years ago when we were at our prior firm. We talked about doing litigators at lunch because of this meeting that Amy and I had, and she suggested a lunch meeting, and it was apparently the worst suggestion on the planet.
Horrible.
But so out of that came our idea to have our litigators at lunch theme, taking a break, talking about different topics. And I think when we started, I think we envisioned that it would be more legal topics. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that we felt like we were going to come on here and we almost felt like required to talk about our legal
that is so
world.
That is perfect way to say it.
Right? Because I don't know, it's oh, well, what could you two lawyers have to talk about that would be impactful for business owners, working parents? What could you possibly have to say just about life? You're going to have to tie in legal topics. And so we did. And it was so funny because every time that we would be what do we want to talk about this week? What do we want to, do the podcast on? We'd be let's do something that we know how to talk about. Yeah. And all of those topics were the things that actually affected us in our life, our personal life, also building the business. But it became an evolution where we talk about law all day long. This is not what we want to talk about when we come on here.
And not that it's not interesting to us, but not for the podcast. Yeah. Now, topics we do love to talk about are business ownership, issues relating to how you communicate with your employees and your team. Yeah. What it means to run a business and what responsibility that comes with. Topics like that can relate, that anybody who's not a lawyer can also relate to those topics.
Totally.
We have, sprinkled in legal topics here and there. But to be honest, I don't remember the last time we did a legal topic. Do you?
No, not at all. Maybe it was the one where we were talking about how to collect monies from people that, you recover a judgment against. That might be the last one. That was a really long time ago. You're going to have to scroll
so long ago that I don't even remember talking about it.
It's true. It's kind of just been an evolution because we realized that as we were showing up every single week, and while we would love to be able to block off our calendar for an entire day and just record podcast episodes, it is very rare that we can record more than 2 at a time.
That's a max.
Because our schedules are just so crazy, and that takes a lot of time away from, other things that we have to do. And so it would be great to do that, but we were doing this on an every week basis. And literally these topics were unfolding in real time every single week. So we started to realize wow, there are a lot of lessons that we are experiencing that we want to share, because ultimately what we have always said from the very beginning of this podcast and from years ago was that we wish there were more attorneys and women like us that were available to us, that told us the real hard truths of being an attorney, being a working parent, being a business owner, and really pulling back the curtain. And we wanted to pay it forward now with this podcast. So I think we're talking about topics that are relevant, that are unfolding in real time, that you all can be on the ride with us, and you can hopefully be learning from us paying it forward to you.
Yeah. And I think that's our main goal, is to really pay it forward, because we've both had people in our lives that, you know, especially professionally, that we've learned from.
Yeah.
And people that have been good to us and lessons we've learned along the way. And we really just want to pay it forward. And I always said, like, if this podcast helps one person, I'll be happy.
Mhm.
We don't need 1 million listeners, although that would be fabulous.
Yep.
But if we can help anybody, that would be a goal
Yeah.
for us, because being a working mom, why do we use that phrase? We just do.
I know
right?
we just
So
do.
being a mom that works is really hard. And especially when you are running a business. Now, Amy and I, you know, since we started our podcast, was Dawn working with us when we started?
On a part-time basis, really.
Right. So since we started that podcast almost 2 years ago, Dawn has been full-time with us for more than a year. And
Yep.
now we have another full-time employee.
Yes.
So our business is growing, which is fabulous, but we've had to adjust along the way.
Mhm.
And figuring out how to handle running a business. So figuring out how to handle the practice of law, the business of law, and managing everything at home has been a wild ride for us.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
I agree. And then you think about it like in your personal life with your family and your kids, if you have them, there's the practice of raising a family. And then there's the business of it too, like keeping things in line, that there's so many crossovers and correlations between the two, but there's a lot on our plates. There's just categorically so much on our plates. And it feels like if we can, I guess, maybe tie back to like the very beginning of where we wanted this podcast to go and serving other people and really being real and honest, is like, we also wanted to be that voice that was not sugarcoating, right?
Yes.
We didn't want to have the watered down interactions. Like we would run into people at, you know, bar association functions or like in the courthouse, and we're like, hey, how's things going? And they're like, oh, it's so busy. What does that mean? What does that mean? Does it mean busy?
We
Great.
do say that all the time.
I know,
but
we do, but what does that mean? Like, tell me the real deal. Like, what is it that you're struggling with, dealing with, challenges, joys, growth, all of these things? And for us, when we look back as to what Laura was saying about the past 2 years, we've been busy trying to figure out how to evolve with our business at a speed that we didn't realize it was going to evolve at. Like,
we were not
at all
anticipating that, because when we first started this podcast, we had been in business for what? I mean, the two of us together for what, 6 months?
Yeah, it was just about 6 months at that point. And much to my chagrin, Laura was the one that was like, okay, come on, we got to start our podcast. We got to do it. We know we want to do this. And this was just a reality that like, this would not have come to life, but for us having our own business together.
Yeah.
This would not be in existence. Like without a doubt, guaranteed, we would not be able to bring this off the ground and have this podcast and deliver it to you. And so I think we kind of like just jumped at the opportunity. We were like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And because our marketing team also just so happened to provide podcast editing.
Yeah.
And we were like, you do that? Really? So all those stars started to align, and we were like, all right, this is a sign for us to like get going with this project. We had
known for a long time that we wanted to do something like this.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I said to you, maybe we should start a blog, like, because we can bring two different perspectives. We're in two different phases of our lives. But why do you think in the beginning, we felt like we had to talk about legal topics?
I feel like we thought we didn't have anything else to offer, because like legitimacy is everything. Like, how could you as a 6-month-old business owner together or business partner together have something to share that's credible to an audience? Like, what are you going through? And it's so funny because we always say the things that happen in your life, like they are setting you up for the next phase of your life. So you and I were in direct marketing for quite some time. And in those trainings and in like all of the information that was given to us, they always said, don't wait until you have results. You have to start sharing while you're in the process, because it's more relatable to people. Like showing up with a 6-pack is not going to help the person that's never worked out one day in their life. Like you need to start where you are and start where you stand. And so for us, like, we were like, all right, we should just start talking, because what we're going through is like real. It is really happening to other people. And now we're bringing people along in a way that's like, we're walking alongside you as opposed to preaching to you from like a pulpit. We're like, we say this all the time. We don't have our stuff together.
Yeah.
We don't know all the answers. We are not perfect in any respect, but I think that's what makes it so relatable for so many people.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was that said this years ago, but it was Rachel Hollis that said she doesn't talk about a problem that she's going through or the solution to that problem until she's made it through to the other side. And, you know, sometimes when we talk about things that are happening in real time, I think about that, like, should we wait until we're through it and we have an answer? And I think it's more beneficial to hear somebody who's in the process of going through it.
Agreed.
And what's happening in real time, and what they're struggling with at the moment. Does that make sense?
I 1000% co-sign to that, because here's why. If you think about this, if you get through a challenge and you're on the other side, your hindsight is 2020. It is so easy to sit there and say, well, why didn't you do it this way? Or you could do that. Just get off your butt and start working at it. Start grinding. Go make those phone calls. But what's it like every day when you wake up and, like, let's say for our intents and purposes this morning, what did I tell you about? My son falls out of his bed. My entire morning is derailed. I have spring break for my daughter this week, which has just been, it's been amazing. She's been wonderful. But it's a monkey wrench. So it's really easy for the Amy 6 months from now to be like, you know what, get up and make that sales pitch, or get up and get that client. But what about the Amy that's in real time today talking about the motivation she needs, or the discipline she needs, or like the struggles and challenges she faces on a daily basis? Like that real time micro view of what you're going through, I think brings out more lessons to be learned than saying from 10 years from now when you have it all figured out, oh yeah, I remember what it was like when I was just starting out in business, and this is what I would have done differently. But it's like sometimes so not relatable because you're not on that same playing field.
You're removed from that point in time.
Right.
So how did you talk yourself through this morning?
So how I talked myself through this morning, I said to myself, okay, well, this is not going according to plan. And by the way, I slept great. I woke up on time. I was like ready to crush the day. And then this just like a dime, it turned. So I said, you know what, instead of stressing myself out, I'm just going to let this play out how it's playing out. I'm just going to give into it. And I ended up a lot less stressed. I ended up a lot calmer in my approach of everything. I was acting with more intention because I knew that I was, you know, time was not necessarily on my side. And I just went methodically through the rest of my morning routine, and I still got it all done. So it's like that stress and overwhelm I would have created for myself was avoided because I just said, forget it. Like, I just have to be here and deal with this situation as it's unfolding.
But tell me if you agree with this statement.
Yeah.
The Amy of today handled that scenario much better than the Amy of 2 years ago would have.
Oh my gosh. 1000%. Well, and also because,
and I'm in the same boat. Like I'm very different, I feel, than I was
totally
like 2
different.
Years ago.
Totally different. And it's funny. I listened to our first podcast episode about a month ago. I was like, just for nostalgia's sake, I'm going to listen to it again. We still sound very much alike. We still like talk the same way. Like the banter that you hear on here is literally the banter we have in real life. But then there's something about like the wisdom, I think, that we're gaining over these years, and the wisdom of like being more vulnerable and sharing and realizing what our lane is
and
with
being
this
more
podcast.
Comfortable with sharing. Because
Totally.
I don't think we were in a place 2 years ago where we were as comfortable sharing, being vulnerable, because in our profession, you're supposed to be tough. Right?
Oh yeah.
You're not supposed to talk about those things. I think today it's more acceptable to be a little bit more vulnerable than it was maybe even pre-COVID. But you know, it's hard when you're in a profession like this to talk about and say, you know what, I had a really hard day yesterday, or I am struggling with this, or whatever. You know, so I think that is something that we've developed over the last couple of years in terms of being more comfortable in our own skin, basically.
Yeah.
Because this is who we are.
Yeah.
Like coming out, talking about these real issues, being honest about it.
Yeah.
Me saying how spring break is like my worst nightmare when my kids are home. That's me. Like that's my reality.
Right.
And even a couple years ago, I don't know that I would have been so with you, of course, but
Right.
not like in public.
No, totally. And I think that here's that hindsight. We have gotten so much feedback that's been incredibly positive from our colleagues, which, it was the other funny thing when we talked about what we wanted to do for this podcast. Everybody tells you like, who are you speaking to? Who's your audience? And at first it was working female attorneys. Like it was that very narrow niche. And then we started hearing that there were other attorneys in the county that were like noticing our marketing and our branding and our podcast. And they were listening and they were like, wow, we love that topic. And like sitting judges in the courthouse across the street from us are listening to our podcast and listening to our advice. And we were like, what? Did he just say that on this call? That's crazy. So we started to realize like, wow, maybe we are approaching this from too narrow and too limited of a scope. Like we need to start expanding the reach that we really want to reach. And by doing that, we realized how much more there was to offer in what we were sharing and how people were really actually gravitating to how relatable we were.
And that it doesn't apply to just women.
And it just
right. What was the conversation you had this weekend?
So this past weekend, my husband ran into someone who said that they have been listening to our podcast and
a man.
As a man. Yeah. Totally not even expecting this individual, although like I know he knows my husband well and he's seen, me share things and we're friends on social media and whatnot. But it was really nice to hear that he said their topics are so relatable. And like sometimes they definitely are more skewed towards working women, which we're not going to ignore that. Like That's do represent that class of women. But that he said, I would love to hear more of their perspective, more from a gender neutral perspective, like a working parent perspective or the business ownership perspective, because their thoughts are really, creative and they're great to listen to. One, the compliment that's tucked in there is just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's a professional as well. Like he's a very smart, educated professional that has a really awesome job. And it was just really cool to hear that kind of feedback from somebody that is kind of unsuspecting. But then when Laura and I talked it through, we were like, wow, like that means that we're reaching an expanse that we didn't even realize, which is going to cause this podcast to also pivot and grow.
Yeah, I think that we can revisit some of the topics that we've discussed in the past and come at it from more of a neutral angle.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And it shows you, I think, how much the world has changed.
Yeah.
Because there are men that struggle with the same issues,
Mhm.
right? So they're working dads. Like, why? I hate that phrase, working moms, but like, we're just working parents,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Most parents today work.
Yes.
Right?
Outside the home.
Outside
Let's be
the
very clear.
Yeah.
Yes. All parents have a very difficult job. We're not trying to be polarizing here. We're talking, of course, from a perspective of we have a business that's brick and mortar outside of our actual physical homes.
But that has changed as well.
Yes.
So when we first started this, totally side note,
Mm-hmm.
when we first started our podcast, it was during COVID.
Yep.
So we were a virtual firm. I've always had this office since I went out on my own.
Yeah.
But we weren't here all the time. We were really working from home, and I was only here when I had to do a closing or I had to meet a client or something like that. Now we're back in the office.
Yes.
So that presents a whole other set of issues.
Mhm.
So we're not home. I have to now check with Mike every day. Do you have calls this afternoon? Do I have to be home to get the kids off the bus? So it's a little more juggling, but gives us more topics to talk about.
Oh, for sure.
But even that has
Yeah.
evolved.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to just use this conference room, and now we have 3 offices and the front desk
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
So
We're physically and mentally and all the things expanding. We're expanding in all ways. So if you remember at the very beginning, I said there must be a hidden lesson in all of this. And I think that the hidden lesson here is that everything is always changing. That is the one constant that you can unequivocally rely upon, is that your life your business, your everything is always in a period of change. And if you're not willing to recognize the change and adjust to the change, then you're going to continue to hit against the same challenges and problems that you face. And I think that the one thing that I love about this podcast and what it represents is that we came in with one idea and we've had to branch, whether it be naturally or whether it be we were forced to level up in our thinking because new circumstances presented itself. For our business, we have new employees. So we have a whole new plethora of topics to talk about delegation, about communication, about team, leadership, service, everything that wouldn't otherwise be realized unless we were actually living it.
And these are topics we're learning and growing as we go.
Yeah.
We weren't born knowing how to do this stuff. And in our prior roles, we weren't in a leadership role.
No.
We just did the work and that's it.
Yeah.
So this is a whole new experience for us. So we hope that by us bringing you along for the journey and talking realistically about, what we're going through and what we're working on, what we're learning, how we're growing and how we're handling it, it shows people that it is possible to do the things that you want to do. It may not always look like you want it to look, like your day didn't start the way you wanted it to start today, but it is what it is. You kind of just have to roll with it. Some days I'm more accepting of that than others.
Yes.
I'm definitely better at it now than I used to be because I have to be. If this business is going to grow and we're going to succeed the way we want to succeed and raise our families at the same time, we have to roll with it.
We have to roll with it. We have to just roll with it. And I think that that's important, especially for individuals that are struggling to just put one foot through, in front of the other every single day because you feel like you have the best laid plans and then they get sidelined. It's like we are two examples of people that are walking right alongside you and having our plans sidelined on a daily basis. Like just because we've hit 100 episodes doesn't mean that there's not more to do after this. There's always growth. There's always that next level that you want to work towards. And I think that we're just really excited. Like it's crazy to think that we have spent over 2,000 minutes talking about all of the things that we've encountered in the past 2 years. It's almost like a journal or like a diary of like all of the ebbs and flows of our business and our personal lives. And I think for me, I'm just really excited to continue to see where this goes. Like I don't have the expectations of what it has to be or what it should look like. I'm like here for the ride for sure.
I think that's one thing we've gotten better at. Like it should be a certain way. We've gotten better at just going with it and letting it take us wherever it's going to go.
Yeah.
And I guess our main goal is to just, bring you along for the ride and hope that you will get something out of it that will help you in your own lives. And we've so much enjoyed the first 100 episodes. We could not be more thankful, right?
Yeah.
For our audience and our loyal listeners. We really appreciate it because your support is, what gives us the push to keep going, knowing that there are people listening. It could be 2 people and we would still be going because even if it's just 2 people, that means that we're helping somebody.
Yep.
So we thank you so much for your unwavering support during the first 100 episodes. And we look forward to the next 100.
Yay.
So we thank you for listening and we'll talk to you on the next episode.